Good morning. We have formed a quorum. I call the meeting to order now. I'd like to thank all the government officials for their attendance. As at the last meeting, in this year 2017-18, we approved 8 items with a total funding of $8.1815 billion. We will continue with the 6 items that we have not completed the scrutinies of which on the 29th of January. The 6 items would involve a total of $18.4976 billion. If these items are approved, then we will have approved 14 items with a total funding of $26.6791 billion. Disregarding the $2.674 billion for the land resumption and computerization projects, the total funding for public works program will be $24.051 billion. I would like to remind members, if you have direct or indirect procurement interest in relation to the discussion items, please disclose the nature of your interest in accordance with Rule 83A of our Rules of Procedures. Members are also reminded to pay attention to Rule 84 in respect of voting while you have a direct pecuniary interest in relation to the items concerned. First item, PWSC 2017-2015. Members are invited to recommended to approve a total allocation of $12.4919 million for 2018 for the broad allocation subhead under the Capital Works Reserve Fund. We started our discussion on the 22nd, and then we continued on the 29th. Now we'll continue. We have a list of officials attending this meeting for the item. I will introduce them one by one. 16 members asked questions on this item during the past meetings, and one of them has already asked 14 questions. Another one, 11, and yet another 9 questions. We have Ms. Tanya Chan for the first round. 4 minutes. Yes, this is the first question from you. I want to ask a question about Annex 5C 5101DX. Study of access of options to LUP Sub 1 in Shed O for removal of marine refuse. The amount asked for is not great, but what about the scope? Well, I'm the chairperson of the Environmental Affairs panel, but I would say that marine refuse affects our environments rather seriously, so I would like to know more about what this project is about. Do we have a lady? Miss Assistant Director of Environmental Protection, Ms. Tseung. On this study of access options to LUP Sub 1 in Shed O for removal of marine refuse. LUP Sub 1 is an east-facing bay in the southern district. In the winter, it's affected by the monsoon wind, and refuse can easily accumulate at the location concerned. Because of the topography, it's difficult to access LUP Sub 1. In the past, FEHD colleagues did their best, and when the weather permits, they would go there to remove the refuse. But because there is no direct land access, they will have to do it by sea. As I've said, the wind direction poses certain danger. and the refuse accumulated there is very difficult to clear. And therefore, we would like to conduct a study. Lap Sap Wan is now put on very top of the priority list for the removal exercises. We would like to see whether there is any way to improve the operations for clearing of or removal of refuse. That's why we put in this bid to apply for funding approval. Let's hope that after the study we can come up with options in relation to infrastructure so that the refuse can be cleared more comprehensively. That's roughly the scope of the study. Chen. Well, that was very clear. I have no further follow-up. But I have another question regarding head 703, and that's enclosure 3A 3004GX. And this is page 17 of the paper, which is actually the Northeast Ching soccer pitch, and also the Shakip May soccer pitch, the renovation of the soccer pitch. I understand that normally these are, hard surface soccer pitches. So regarding a mini soccer pitch, I'll ask the director of the ASD to answer that question. Mr. Yukawa. Thank you, Madam Director. For the 3 soccer pitches referred to, they will all be paved with, artificial turf. So, well, I have actually conducted a study on the subject of artificial turf. You still have 3 more minutes. Please go on. Earlier on, I had a meeting with the LCSD expressing my concern for artificial turf. At the end of last year, I think 3 departments would conduct an interdepartmental study as to whether or not the 3rd generation of artificial turf is carcinogenic. Apparently, the findings have not yet been released. What I'd like to know is whether or not we're still converting old car tires into plastic pellets, or are we going to use other materials other than FIF, the FIFA, guidelines. I'd like to know whether or not the quality of the materials used are up to standard, because I've taken the materials to the lab for analysis, and it was found to be carcinogenic. And there are various media through which people will be exposed to it. It could be turned into powder form, and the players may even swallow them without knowing. So I'd like to know whether or not internationally the materials has been confirmed to be safe. Mrs. Lam. Thank you, Ms. Chen, for your concern. Together, we are working closely with the LCSD. Of course, we would monitor the, relevant authorities internationally. So we will refer to FIFA. Should there be any renovation refurbishment works, we will make reference of the recognized brands of materials. We will only procure the materials which have been certified to be safe. And after they have been installed at the site, there will be certification, and there will be an independent
testing organization to conduct the testing and take delivery of the service before they will be open to the public. Yes, I hope you'll follow up on this more closely. The American EPA has a different approach, but that report or that study was started in the days of President Obama. It also touches on the question of occupational health and safety. Mr. Chen Chi-Chun, your sixth round, 1 minute. Thank you. I'd like to follow up enclosure 5, Annex 5, and a small item. That is 150 head, 5101CX, Ma Liu Shui potential reclamation site, and the consultation fees. So I'd like to ask about the progress of this study, because today table for us are 2 letters. I believe they are submitted by residents. They claim that the executive brief is really very questionable, and they would like the administration to provide details of the findings of the study to the public. So who would like to respond? Mr. Lam? For the the technical study for the feasibility of reclamation of Ma Liu Shui, the study started 2 years ago. And the study was completed last year. And the extract of the report of that study has been put on to our website. It is our intention that this project will be discussed by the District Council this year. As regard the report of the findings of the study, we have received requests that they should be disclosed. We are now working on that, and later on that report will be open to the public. Well, in Annex 5, there is no amount here. So is it that you are only, asking for funding to pay the balance? Normally for such studies, the study was finished at the end of last year. So for 2017, 2018, there will still be expenses to be incurred. But it will also depend, for 2018, 2019, there might still be other expenses to be paid. So what is the amount you are asking for this item? Well, in Annex 5, you only have a table without the detailed breakdowns. We have, well, a long list. Yes, more than 700 pages. Now, according to my information, for this project, the project estimate for this item is $14.12 million. Next, we have Dr. Fernando Tseung, who is going to ask his 12th question, and then Eddie G has already asked 13 questions. It's the 14th round. And KK Kwan, the 9th round, and Michael Teen has not yet arrived. So this is already the 3rd meeting. We're into the 3rd meeting discussing this item, and I will soon have to draw a line. So if any members would like to ask questions, please press the button, and after that I'm going to draw a line. But if there are members who have not yet spoken on this item, I will still allow them to ask the first round of questions. For those who've already asked more than 10 questions, although members would only have 1 minute after they've asked, 4 or 5 rounds of questions. Very often they took longer than 1 minute. So I believe it's time that I have to draw a line. So other than the few members I mentioned, we still have Wu Chi-wai for the first round, Tan Ye Chen the 3rd round. I'll ask Mr. Wu Chi-wai to speak first. You have 4 minutes. For the funding application of the Capital Works Reserve Fund, there are many items which actually are consultation fees for minor works and so on. For such studies, I just wonder whether you could consider adopting this mechanism, because government is using public funds to carry out such studies. And very often the findings of these studies are only published in the form of an extract which is put onto the government website. I wonder whether or not you would disclose the full details of the report, so that, of course, not everybody would be interested in reading such reports, but those who are interested, I think, should have the channel to access that paper, so that we would know in the course of the investigation what the government was considering, and also at a very early stage we would be able to understand the government's intention and what are the inadequacies of the study, so that we will be able to give you our input at an early stage. Because very often by the time you come to apply for funding, we'll be asking all kinds of questions. These questions have not been looked at during the stage of the consultancy study. Or the study might not have been meticulous enough, so that when you apply for funding, you would encounter difficulties. I think this is a very common phenomenon. So would you consider disclosing the full details of the findings of such studies, so that the public can access such information? I think many departments do conduct studies. Now, who would like to answer the question? Mr. Wu Chi-wei's suggestion. Who would like to respond to that? Mr. Hon Chi-kung, Family Secretary. I've heard Mr. Wu's suggestion. I hope Mr. Wu will understand that there are many such studies, even for land slips. We're talking about many, different reports of many studies. We need to be specific. We need to consider which studies are those which the public and members are interested, and where we're able to disclose the details, we will try our best to do that. In future, when there are major projects, and I think the disclosure would help members to discuss the item. But we're not talking about more than 10,000 such projects. You're talking about many, many studies. So it's not easy to make full disclosure. But to be more specific, I think we can consider, disclosing individual, reports. So these are records of the studies conducted by the government. So records are records. So far, we don't have any, archive, an ordinance on archives. So I don't know. You might be conducting different types of studies. For example, a university, my students may be interested into the study, certain geotechnical study, and the university students may want to ask the government for such information. I'm not saying that you should disclose details regarding some items and not the others. Since we're talking about disclosure of information, since you've conducted a study, you can put it in the database, and members of the public who are interested can search them online. It is the public which would search such information. It is not for the government to control what information it wants to disclose. What Mr. Wu is saying really is that you could perhaps provide a link for members of the public to actually access such reports. Is it possible for you to disclose the reports of studies in that way? I think this is a policy issue which we can further explore in other fora. Right. Mr. Wu Chi-wei would like to go for a second round. I really have to draw a line here. After I've said that I'm going to draw a line, Mr. Ray Chen also had pressed his button. Mr. Leung Chi-chung, your first round, you have 4 minutes. I think I've already asked my first round. Well, that's what the computer record shows. Never mind. Well, this is really our third meeting on this subject. I'd like to talk about our procedure. I believe I also asked questions on this item at the last meeting, and some members really asked many questions regarding policies, regarding land resumption, and so on. I don't know whether or not, Chairman yourself, although you've drawn a line, does it mean that in respect of certain items or projects, we can really ask, of course they can, submit these items individually at a later stage. Are we going to, is it your arrangement that we can discuss details of each and every item under this block allocation? Ms. Leung, Chi-Kung, I believe you are also a seasoned councillor. I believe in the last few PWSC meetings, you would have seen that some members are very concerned about certain items as to whether they are being too specific in terms of, maintaining. Of course, it is my duty to remind members. Chairman, I know, but I have repeatedly stressed that the Capital Works Reserve Fund, what is the mechanism? For example, for funding application for land resumption, that is only a contingency. I've already explained that repeatedly, but despite that, members still, well, sometimes members understand the mechanism. I hope members will be able to focus on the projects. Of course, as to whether or not members are being too meticulous with the questions, I think members should be able to make up their mind.
I just want to know, let's say we have completed our discussion. The 100 or so items will be submitted to the FC, right? Well, there may be members asking for certain items to be voted on separately. And then there will be questions, time allowed for questions. The FC will not give a blanket approval for all the items, right? Well, in accordance with past arrangements for broad allocation, the approval will be given for the entire block. But I don't think the FC can say that no one should ask questions about the items covered by the broad allocation. But there's a need for members to strike a balance. We have 9,000 projects, ongoing projects, and 1,000 or so new projects. And if we are going to discuss the details of all these projects, we need a few years. And I don't think we can complete it in 2018, 2019. I think, Mr. Leung, your concerns are understood. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, second round, 3 minutes. Well, I would like to hear from the Permanent Secretary regarding my suggestion. I don't know whether my suggestion will involve a very complicated arrangement on the part of the government. We're talking about studies. Well, of course, the findings, the reports are stored digitally. I just want to have a link for access. And I don't think it's technically a problem. So may I have an answer from the Permanent Secretary? Or else I would have to ask the same question when this item is with the FC. I think, Mr. Wu, you're asking for full disclosure of all the studies. that may be a problem. We may not be able to do it comprehensively. Individual projects and studies may involve sensitive information. So you say that we should go for full disclosure. That may not be feasible. But we're talking about public works program or capital works fund. Yes, but maybe there seems sensitive information involved. So I cannot promise you that all the findings will be disclosed. All right, let's look at it from the other angle. You should give us a list, and if there's sensitive information, and therefore no disclosure, give us an indication, and we know it. We're talking about a lot of studies. And if you want to have a certain study report disclosed, by all means, tell us your request, and our colleague would try to find out whether there's sensitive information and whether disclosure can be done. What sensitive information will be involved? Can you give us some examples? And I don't think you would be looking into the economic returns and benefits. Well, I cannot really give you examples right away. There may be third-party and financial information. So I cannot promise you now that there will be full disclosure. But you can come up with a list. Of course, studies being carried out by the government and funded by the government will of course be known to all. Can we get a list, a full list? Or we can have a list of the ongoing projects. I don't know whether the same can be done for studies. Please follow up the matter after the meeting. Time is up. Ms. Tanya Chan for the third round, 2 minutes. I have a question about, it's page 20. Head 704, subhead 4100DX. Hong Kong North rainwater drainage review. I'd like to know more. I'll ask the Director of Drainage Services to respond to the question. Thank you for your question, Ms. Chan. We have 12 districts under which rainwater drainage reviews have been conducted. For Island North, we have completed the study, and we are going to draw some conclusions on where on the island, on Hong Kong Island, we can carry out improvement works. We're going to consult the District Council in due course. What are we talking about? Northern Hong Kong Island. It's of course at the waterfront, the coastal area, but how many district councils will be involved? We're talking about the stretch from Chai Wan to Shao Kei Wan to North Point all the way to Wan Chai. So we are talking about Eastern District Council and Wan Chai District Council. When will the review be completed? As I've said, in the first quarter, the review will be completed. We are now preparing to write up the conclusions, and then we could come up with some recommendations for which we are going to consult the district councils. Ms. Ray Chan, 7th round, 1 minute. I want to follow up on the reclamation project at Ma Liu Sui. It said that the government would consult the district council. Well, this is not a technical feasibility study. It's a technical study. After going to the district council, are you going to proceed to reclamation right away, or are you going to conduct a feasibility study first? And secondly, the permanent secretary said that you would look into the access to information code to see whether the reports can be made available. Can it be done with the sensitive parts deleted or blocked? On the question of Ma Liu Shui reclamation and the roadmap, the timetable, I can say that after the technical study is completed this year, within this year, we're going to go to the district council for consultation. Next, there will be a planning and an engineering study. And that is to say, we're not going to proceed to the implementation right away. There will be a technical and engineering study. As for this particular technical study, within this quarter, we can make the report available for public access. Dr. Fernando Zhang, the 12th round. Mr. Chu Hoi-taek, the 15th round. May I remind members that if you have a motion under 32A, please give me as soon as you can. I've received some from Mr. Ray Chan. And Mr. Chu, last time you said you are going to submit some as well. Well, those are covered by Mr. Ray Chan's motions. Well, you keep saying that it is a 12th round. We are talking about a total funding of $12.5 billion. Well, I didn't say anything that is outrageous or like that. But the fact is, this is the 12th round. Every time you are given 1 minute, please ask right away. I have this AFCD leaflet on Agri Park with three beautiful photos. Two on the farmland, very green. I would like to ask the director of AFC, when was the two photos taken? I don't have the information. I can tell you, it's Jiu King. This will be turned into a row. The field is work on by Man Guo. They have been, their family has been doing that for 48 years, and he said that the land has been resumed. Do you know how much time is needed to prepare a land suitable for farming? So how do you mitigate the loss incurred by resuming the land to this particular farmer? First of all, we need to build a road to facilitate the Agri Park. And then in the future, the land is managed by government, and the farmers would enjoy stable leases under which they can make long-term investment. So it may be inevitable that some of the land may be used for infrastructure, therefore affecting some farmers there. In the first phase of the Agri Park, we would convert fallow the agricultural land into the active farmed land, and then we would build a road. So in that case, farmers can move to a new piece of farmland before infrastructure project is carried out. That's the work plan we have. We have endeavored to minimize the implications for farmers. Can you then promise us that there will be seamless transition? Well, that's our thinking. Well, which endeavor to implement what we have already said. I can promise that much.
Mr. Lau Kok-fan, your first round, so I'm going to allow you 4 minutes. Mr. Lau, thank you. I'm also going to ask a question on the agri park. The director said that he would try his best to really, resettle the farmers before you will proceed with the works. But for Northeast NT, we have always been asking the AF and CD to conduct a freezing exercise, but so far you've not yet done that. And this is really regrettable. Recently, I've taken up a case in Long Yun. Mr. Young there was informed by the landlord that he would need to vacate the farm or the farmland. You all along, you have not been helping the farmers. What's the point of setting up the agri park? When are you going to conduct a freezing exercise? And also for farmers who are going to be forcibly evicted, how are you going to help them? Is it the director who would like to answer the question? Yes. The purpose of setting up the agri park is not only to help the sustainable development of agriculture, it would also help resettle farmers who like to continue with the farming when their farms have been resumed. So for phase 1, we've already resettled the farmers. For comparable projects, it would depend on the progress of the building of the agri park and the progress of the other development projects. If some farmers are indeed affected by the certain government development projects, the farmers may contact us and we can see whether we can find some alternative sites for them to resettle. And if they satisfy those conditions I mentioned, they would have the priority to move into the agri park. So that's the present arrangement. Well, the agri park, one of the most important purpose for setting up the agri park is to accommodate the farmers in Northeast NT, but there's neither here or there now. The point is that the farmers are already being forcibly evicted, and you've never even bothered to approach them to find out. I'm asking you, would you be willing to take over those cases which have come to ask for my assistance and help register these affected farmers? If the farmer has information regarding the affected farmers, of course we will try our best to help those affected farmers. So Mr. Lau has such information, he may pass them on to us after the meeting, and we'll see how we will be able to help. Okay, I'll give you the information after the meeting. I hope that you will also give an undertaking that your colleagues would do this? I mean, there is a freezing exercise for those who live in squatter huts, but are you going to do the same for the farmers? You're passing the buck on to the Development Bureau, and the Development Bureau said it's the responsibility of the AFCD. So who is to be responsible? Regarding how we can help the farmers find alternative sites to continue with the farming, this is an exercise which our department is doing all the time. So if farmers want to find alternative sites to continue the farming, if they are affected by redevelopment, they can approach us. Mr. Eddie G, your 15th round. I agree with Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. They're not begging you to help them, resume the farming. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan is saying that you should proactively help them register. Chairman, you mentioned that for items like 110CA, you say these are contingency funds for land resumption. It's going to be spent immediately. At the last meeting, the Director of Agriculture and Fishery said that before the block allocation is approved, you will not use the funding reserved for land resumption. Is that the basic way in which money is dispersed in respect of the block allocation? Permanent Secretary. Thank you. In principle, the land resumption procedure is such that we have to wait until funding for the main works have been approved. In the past, there have been individual projects which deviate from the norm, but that was due to special circumstances. As in, normally we would wait for the main projects to be approved. Funding for the main projects have been approved first. For Wang Chao 110CA, funding was approved 2 years ago, and there is a project to build a road there, and it's going to be submitted to the PWSC very soon. After funding for that road project is approved, only then will you use the funding for Wangzhou to resume the land for the affected tenants? Chairman, let me explain the mechanism. As the Undersecretary said, normally we expect that for any land resumption, it is only when the funding for the main projects have been approved would we proceed. We note the concern expressed by Mr. G and other members. He asked why for certain projects, before funding was approved for the main projects, the government would already start to resume the land. Looking at the record for the last few years, we found that such cases are only, belong to a minority of cases. Of the 30 or so cases, there are only 4 or 5, including Wangzhou. Why is it for these few number of projects, before funding for the main projects have been approved, we already initiated the land resumption? We're not trying to create a fait accompli here, but sometimes in cases where we need time to liaise with the residents, once we start the process, we would be able to, approach the affected tenants one by one. According to a record, for those cases in which we would require the tenants to be cleared, normally would only make that demand after funding has been approved. Considering that members' concerns are valid, we've already asked all the departments to, only after the funding for the main works have been approved, would they ask the Lands Department to start the land resumption procedure. Last time, the Director of Agriculture, Fishery and Conservation said that, like the case of Agri Park, they will only wait for the funding for the main works have been approved before they would resume. But for Wang Chao, land resumption has already started. So not rule out the possibility that some tenants have already agreed with the Lands Department regarding compensation. If there's an agreement reached, we have to disperse the compensation to them. So we would pay out the compensation for those cases. But if no agreement has been reached, the government understands that regarding the land resumption, the demand from those affected, that we will, for those cases, we will follow the established mechanism. We're going to deal with the motions proposed moved by members. So, Mr. Chen Chi will deal with your first motion, 001. I'd like to call for a division. Okay, the division bell will ring for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you can read out your motion, Mr. Chan. According to Section 32A of our Rules of Procedure, I move that the authorities should immediately improve the system on compensation for villagers who are affected by clearance, including arrangements for the affected residents in the new development areas and other capital works projects. Before that reform is completed, the administration should not use funding from the block allocation to pay out compensation for land resumption and for the land affected by the Guangzhou public housing development project.
So
So we are going to vote on the motion moved by Mr. Ray Chen pursuant to Section 32A, the text of which is now displayed on the screen. So voting begins. Before I announce the result, please check the votes that you have cast. Voting is now closed. We will display the result. We have 26 in favor, 26 members present, 8 in favor and 8 against, and 1 abstention. We now move on to 002. Again, you're calling for division. According to Section 32A of the Rules of Procedure of the PWSC, I move that given the Phase 1 of the agri-farm in Kowloon, the alignment of the road for Phase 1 will spoil the quality farmland and forcibly evict the farmers. This is against the original policy intention. I urge that the administration will use the country roads to link up with Phase 1 in order not to spoil the arable land.
各位而家要表決嘅呢，就係
Members, we are going to vote on this motion moved by Mr. Chan Chi-chin in accordance with 32A. Are we going? Do we agree that we should deal with this motion? Voting begins. Before I announce the results, please verify your votes. Voting is now closed and the result is displayed. 26 present, 8 for, 16 against, 1 abstention. The motion is negative. We have handled 2 32A motions. If members have no further questions, I'll now put the item to the vote. And that is for our division. All right, please ring the bell for 5 minutes. We're going to vote on the broad allocation for the Capital Works Reserve Fund. And that is whether we are going to recommend to the FC to approve the broad allocation. Members, we are going to vote on PWSC 2017, 2018, 25 broad allocation for the Capital Works Reserve Fund. The amount is $12.4919 billion. All right, voting begins. Before I announce the voting is closed, please verify your votes. Voting is now closed and result displayed. Present 28, 19 for, no objection, 8 abstain. The motion is carried. Is approved. Does any member wish to have the separate items voting for some of the items? Mr. Chu Hoi-tik ask for that. Let's proceed to the next item. Item 2. 64JA, construction of discipline services quarters for the FSD at Passing Kok, Cheung Kwan O. Paper PWSC 2017-18, number 26. Members are invited to recommend to the FC the upgrading of 64JA to Category A at an estimated cost of $1.625 billion in money of day prices. The security panel was consulted, and the panel did not object to the submission of this item. For our consideration, we have Mr. Ao Chi-kwong, Under Secretary for Security, Mr. Chen Yun-dak, Permanent Principal Assistant Secretary, and Mr. Cha Wing-kwong, and Mr. Yeung Yan-kin, Assistant Director, Senior Superintendent Mr. Wong Kar-wing, and Mr. Tam Yin-ping, DPO. If no member wishes to ask questions, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, first round, 4 minutes. 101 parking spaces will be provided under this project. On various occasions, I have expressed my concern about the number of parking spaces provided in these quarters. I know this is done in accordance with Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines. Because of the operational needs, it seems that discipline services officers have a demand for parking spaces far exceed what you can provide. Can you provide something which can meet needs, operational needs? Because various discipline services quarters, you see cars, lots of cars parked along the driveway. So what's the position of the government in this regard? Mr. Ngao, Under Secretary, I thank Mr. Wu for his question, and I also thank him for showing concern to the needs of discipline services officers. Yes, we have to comply with the Hong Kong planning standard of guidelines. 101 parking spaces for cars and 7 parking spaces for motorcycles. We are already providing the maximum allowed. There are other transport available. It's just 20 minutes from a home from the MTR station. I know there are quarters which are very close to the MTR stations, but still your colleagues have to park their cars on the road. So this has to do with the planning standards and also the parking needs. Well, might be higher than the residential areas because of their work nature. So if you don't provide more, they will just use the road for parking. So are you going to think about providing more parking spaces so that your colleagues don't have to park on the road? You're saying that you're constrained by the Hong Kong planning standard and guidelines, and but what about in providing something else near the quarters?
We're actually encouraging illegal parking, and that is not reasonable either. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your concern. Well, we understand that there is this constraint, but we must also take into consideration the constraints and the road and traffic arrangements. And we're well aware of those constraints, but you cannot stop people from, driving the cars. So regarding the demand for parking spaces, have you ever conducted a study? Furthermore, given that there are so many quarters there, have you conducted a study regarding the demand for parking spaces to find out what the demand is? Because the actual demand far exceeds the provision that you are making. Deputy Secretary, I don't have anything further to add, but I can assure Mr. Wu that we will follow up on to this matter. Mr. Diji, your first round. Regarding the design, why is that in between the blocks the distance is so close? I mean, people are able to even shake hands, if they stretch the hands out of the windows. Could you provide for more space in between the blocks so that there could be better ventilation? ASD? Director. Thank you for the questions. Mr. G indeed is very meticulous. Now, this is the present design, and we see that there is room for further enhancement. The designer will come up with options so that we can widen the gap or distance between different blocks. There are still some minor details in the design that could be further improved. So with that, I think we would be able to widen the distance between the different blocks further, so that we're confident that we'll be able to do that. Director. So you've not taken ventilation into consideration, right, in your plan? Yes. What is your consideration regarding ventilation? There are a total of 5 blocks, and in the middle, we've considered adopting a overall, balanced approach, and given the present constraint, we have attempted to build the maximum number of units that could be allowed, and on that basis, we hope to be able to segregate the residents and the residents. You know, at the back, there is vehicular traffic. At the front, there will be some open public space for the children and the residents to enjoy. I think the director misunderstood my question. I heard just now you said that you want to widen the distance between the blocks further because you don't, so that they won't be so close to each other, and so that the residents have a better view. My question is whether or not if you did that, you would improve the ventilation, or is it that you've not considered ventilation at all earlier? In respect of the present design, as you find in the document, we've already taken ventilation into consideration, and we find that the design is acceptable. As to whether or not we can further enhance it, we will see whether we could fine-tune the design so that we can have a wider gap in between the building blocks when we proceed with the detailed design. In paragraph 23, you said that the energy conservation green and recycle features include the use of photovoltaic system. I always ask, whenever I see this, I like to always ask what is the capacity of the photovoltaic system. How many kilowatts? I think roughly it's 4,500 kilowatt hours. What's the cost? It's about $600,000. Understood. Mr. Chong Shing, thank you. The DB supports the upgrading of this project to Cat A because there is a very keen demand for quarters among the staff of the disciplined forces. But I also have 2 points to make. First of all, the question relating parking spaces. My constituency in Kowloon East has many quarters for the disciplined staff, and all the those who work in the disciplined forces talk about the shortage of parking spaces. We're told that you've already tried your best according to PSG to provide the maximum. But according to PSG, I understand there are some cases where you can allow for exceptions. So when applied to quarters for the disciplined forces, can you do that? You tell us, well, according to the number of parking spaces you propose to provide, then I would really be worried. 101 parking spaces to serve people living on 5 blocks of quarters, I don't think that is enough. So I hope you will, tell us whether before going to the FC, you could give us an answer as to whether or not you can increase that. Regarding this development, I think for this district, we do not have any other facilities in the vicinity of the site, and you don't have any retail facilities in the whole plan. So have you considered providing for retail facilities like, convenience stores and restaurants to serve the residents there? Because these colleagues may actually have to work in shifts, and I think they need, and I think you should, provide the convenience. Regarding car parks, indeed, the Bureau and the Department have tried the best to provide the maximum number of car parks. But there is the constraint, and for the whole of Hong Kong, the PSG, the HKPSG applies to the whole territory, including private housing developments and these quarters, and therefore we cannot, go beyond what is allowed. For retail facilities and restaurants, in large quarters for disciplinary forces, we do provide for those facilities, but it's rare. For this particular item, we have no plan to provide that because it's not of a large scale. I'm not saying that you should enjoy any, you should be entitled to any special privileges, but I'm saying that the parking situation here is really very serious. You refer to the HKPSG, I understand that, but different political parties have already asked you to review the PSG, but unfortunately you have not done that yet. So I hope you will take a look at that, and when you go to the FC, you have some good news for us. And also on retail facilities, you're right. For some of the quarters for the disciplinary staff, you do have such facilities. So what criteria do you use to decide which of the quarters will be served with these facilities and which are the quarters which will not? Perhaps I can provide Mr. Orr with the information after the meeting. Well, looking at this site, I'm familiar with the area here, and there are no retail facilities in its vicinity. Bearing in mind that the staff have to work in shifts, I hope you will take that in consideration and provide for such retail facilities. Mr. Kong Chun Yu, 4 minutes. Thank you. Early on, there was reports in the media that for this site there will be other FSD quarters to be built here, and also quarters for the discipline forces. I understand that the FSD is now facing, the prospect of a large number of staff retiring, and there is not enough quarters to allocate to your staff. So, do you have the latest numbers? You say you are trying to, build more quarters. Well, what is the queue for those waiting for quarters at the moment? And because I believe many members of the public really respect the fire services officers. So I just like whether you have any updated figures, because the numbers that we have are already outdated by 2 years. For those who are eligible to be allocated quarters, there are 5,515, and the FST now can offer 3,828 quarters. So the shortfall is 30.6%. For this, that's why we are proposing to build 640 odd units here. So simple arithmetic, with the passage of this item, the total number is 5,515 eligible officers, and you only have 2,800 odd units, and together with 600 units to be built, there will still be a shortfall. And bear in mind that you're going to face a wave of retirement. Well, if these units could be built after the passage of this item, then the quarters will only be completed in 2021. So if you add the 648 units, there will still be a shortage from 30% down to 20%. And this is assuming that the FSD will not, hire more staff. But I understand that going forward, we will be hiring more officers. So apparently that the shortage will persist. Of course, I understand that this item will help relieve the shortfall in quarters for FSD officers. But those on the waiting list is like those waiting for public housing. The Pak Sing Kok area in future will be proliferated with FSD quarters. So you say you are now working hard to build the extra 600 odd quarter units. So what is your plan for the next stage? I'd like to thank Mr. Kwan for his concern. Indeed, there is a keen shortage. Average waiting time is 5.3 years. Even for eligible officers, they have to wait for a long time before they will be allocated a unit. 648 extra units will not really be big enough to make up for the shortfall. We do have plans going forward to tackle the problem, but we don't have any details at this stage. According to the information I have on hand, I'd just like to verify this. the purpose of these quarters is that they could be rotated. Namely, since there are not many public housing units allocated to civil servants, and as a result, many of the officers are not able to leave their quarters. And also, how long, what is the maximum duration for your officers who can stay in the quarters? Perhaps I can ask the FSD to answer that question. Thank you. Mr. Young. Generally speaking, after FSD officers retire, they would apply for public housing. And they have 3 chances. And if they fail in the last round, then they will have to vacate their quarters, and they'll be allowed 2 months grace period, at the end of which they have to leave. So the backlog is 12 years. So I don't think we have any record of those retiring to staying for 12 years.
Mr. Wu Chiwai, second round. That's the outstanding issue of parking spaces for the discipline services quarters. This is a common problem for them. If you are constrained by the Hong Kong PSG, perhaps you should talk to the government on innovative ways to provide parking spaces. I don't think the government should just allow, although it's already suspected that it would happen, that you should not allow the illegal parking. And the benchmark size is 50 square meters. Is this common to all quarters? Is there a ceiling or floor in terms of the size? Well, you have already got a shortfall. If you cannot find more land, or maybe if there is a range of this, in respect of the size, maybe you have to consider making some adjustments. And also, what's the average family size you're talking about when you offer the officer a 50 square meter flat? Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your concern. Mr. Ort is also concerned about parking spaces. The department and the bureau will certainly do their best to provide more. On the size, we are going to build 620 H-grade quarters. And here we have some reference size. There are different grades, HG, HI, all the way to L. For grade H, it's about 45 square meters. So this time it's 50 square meters is comparable. If it's H 45 square meters and you provide 50 square meters, so it's a difference of 10%. It would mean the reduction of 10% of the number of quarters. Maybe the officers are more concerned about the availability of quarters than the size. Anything to add, Under Secretary? Well, that's the reference standard. If we move up a grade to G, it's a 55. I think the demand is great. What if the size is 45 square meters? Can you provide more flats, Under Secretary? Maybe Director of agricultural services? Is there flexibility there? Can we build more smaller flats? Well, there's no flexibility. It's either 45 or 50. 45 square meter means it's a flat with 2 rooms. 50, 3 rooms. There's no flexibility. Dr. Kwakake, well, I support this item, but I would like to ask some questions following Mr. Uchiwai. If you follow the grade H standard and you have 10% more units or flats, have you asked the FSD officers concerned what preference they would like to have? They have to wait for 6 years, and if you offer them more, the waiting list will be shorter. In the future, fire services officers will have to work at a remote location such as the Kong Kong Drive, Macau Bridge. I won't repeat the concerns about parking spaces. But you know, today we have advanced technology. Can the ASD make use of this space for 101 parking spaces? You can adopt double deck technology to accommodate more. Can that be considered without affecting the land use? And we can provide more spaces. Second, there are only 7 motorcycle parking spaces, so you are in effect forcing them to park their motorcycles on the road. I've seen many motorcycles used by fire services officers. 600 units and yet 7 motorcycle parking spaces. It's a joke. Have you conducted any surveys? Have you sounded out your officers? How many of them will be using motorcycles to go to work? Undersecretary, thank you, Dr. Kwok, on the question of consultation. The the Security Bureau would regularly to update the staff associations on the progress of the construction of quarters. They note that this project they supported. My question is this: if we stick to 45 square meters and we have 10% more quarters, would the staff side agree that this is a better option to so that the waiting list is shorter, more people can be allocated quarters? If this has not been asked, then why? As I've said, FSD regularly meet with staff associations to report on the progress. The staff associations agree with this approach. They have been given a choice. It's either 45 or 50 square meters. 50 square meters means it's more spacious. I understand that the Staff Association of FSD welcome this particular choice. Maybe my colleague from FSD, Mr. Zhang, can, Mr. Yang can supplement. Assistant Director. We have consulted the 5 staff association over this project. Of every 6 months we hold regular meetings, and we have a departmental consultative meeting. We have talked to them about whether it should be 50 square meters or 45 square meters. They have opted for 50 square meters because according to the ASD, the design will allow, the size will allow 3 bedrooms. And 3-room quarters under grade H is more popular. And on the 29th of May 2017, we published the design plan, and we also talked to the staff association. They are happy with the design. How about double decking the parking spaces and more motorcycle spaces? That would depend on the number allowed by the project. We have no survey conducted on motorcycle parking. But you are going to accommodate 600 officers there, and 7 motorcycle parking spaces are just not realistic. Maybe you can rectify this when the item goes to the FC. Can double decking be considered? I think this has been answered. So the answer is no. Chairman, this is the question. This is the problem. We have to consider the space available for parking. If it's a double decking design, the footprint, the land required will be the same, but there will be double the number of parking spaces. Well, can there be a double deck there? I don't think the flexibility is as simple as that. Miss Tam, as my colleagues have explained, the provision of parking spaces is done in accordance with Hong Kong PSG. The number is based on the Hong Kong PSG. If it is a double deck rack for 2 spaces, we will count 2. The provision of parking spaces will be restrained by the local transport infrastructure and traffic conditions. As for this project, they have already got the maximum allowed. I've spent more time on this because a number of members are concerned about parking. I would say the planning procedure is rather inflexible, in that you cannot look at the actual needs of a particular project and improvise. And you have given up the chance to provide more parking spaces in government buildings. Members from different political parties are not happy about the inflexible approach adopted by the government in providing parking spaces. There's a need for a review, but I think the Undersecretary cannot do anything but to answer like what he did. I hope the relevant panels can continue to follow up the issues of parking spaces. Mr. Chen Chi-chin, you are correct, Chairman. I'm not just talking about this item. There are other discipline services quarters projects at PWSC and FC. We have repeatedly raised questions about parking spaces. They only got a few motorcycle parking spaces. So you're forcing them not to use any motorcycle, or if they are law-abiding and do not park illegally. We cannot assume that they would do so at this quarters at Pak Sing Kwong. It is proposed to build on 5 greenbelt sites in Zhangguanglou for housing. One is close to this Pak Sing Kwong quarters. It can accommodate 8,000 odd people with 2,000 odd flats. It's going to happen sometime in the future, but there's only one road, Pak Sing Kwong Road. If we have a housing estate there, We are concerned about traffic.
個車嘅流量啊，嗰個公共交通啊，呢啲其實政府有冇一個長遠嘅諗
？Does the government have any long-term planning for the housing estate, which is going to accommodate more than about 10,000 people? Well, I don't think the Undersecretary is in a position to answer this question. How about other departments? Ms. Tseung from the DPO. I know the local residents are concerned about the development at the 5 sites for PLH. Before incorporating the 5 sites into the OZP, we conducted detailed technical studies, and we looked at things such as traffic volume. And in terms of the TIA, the project is considered feasible, and we have already made proposals for the improvement and enhancement. In the detailed study that is to follow, there will be further studies on whether there should be road improvement works, so that there will be no adverse traffic implications. Even more people are accommodated day to day.
Road traffic transport. I also raised the question of car parks. You're going to develop this into a community accommodating 10,000 people. I don't know what's going to happen. Also on this site, in its vicinity, you have the Hong Kong movie city, and people always complain about noise nuisance and light nuisance from the premises there, and the EPD has received complaints. So how will this affect the quarters in question, and if so, would there be any noise mitigating measures? Mrs. Lam, ASD. 2 points. First of all, light, and secondly, noise pollution. For the movie city, given its topography, the impact is not so direct. As for noise, the noise actually comes from the road, and we will follow the EPD's, guidelines and conduct some studies. And if necessary, especially for the lower floors, I think in the present design we already provide for that already, but we'll take a more detailed look and see how we can screen out the noise. And if necessary, we will be installing double glazed windows. Eddie G, 3 minutes, your second round. Thank you. I'd like to go back to the question of car parks. Opposite the site, there is going to be, an academy for fire officers. How many car parks are there? If you provide for 100 car parks at the quarters, if that's not enough, could the officers use the car parks in the academy on the other side of the road? Mr. Yeung, Assistant Director. Thank you. Regarding the design of that academy and how it operates, the academy is divided into 2 sections. The northern section is the training area, where we need to set some, safe distance, and no parking will be allowed there because there would be fire use in the case of the drilling. There is also a driver training center where we will train our colleagues to drive ambulances and fire engines. We will also be using the roads for such training. So the northern section of the academy is not suitable for parking. To the south, mainly we have the teaching complexes. One of the responsibilities of the academy is to train some of the special teams of the FSD stationed here. For example, special team tackling hazardous substances and so on and so forth. And they will provide support if any incident should happen. So the vehicles for these specialist teams are already parked there. And there are already 76 such vehicles. So to accommodate more cars, there would not be possible for the academy. What about public transport service? For the 600 odd households or families of the disciplined officers of disciplined services, they can only take public transport if they go all the way out to the environment row. Yeah, if they walk 5 minutes, they will be able to go to the MTR station or take public buses. The FSD has already talked to the public transport operators, but perhaps Mr. Young can elaborate on the details. Thank you. With the completion of the Fire and Ambulance Services Academy, we have liaised with the transport department, the transport operators for 298 will in the peak hours in the morning will go to the site, to the quarters, and at 5:30 to 6:30 in the late afternoon, Route 298 will also go to the vicinity of the Fire and Ambulance Service Academy. When the quarters are completed, we will also fight for the transport arrangements to serve those living in the quarters. Mr. Jonas Ho. Chairman, I'm very concerned about the question of parking as well. Looking at the HKPSG, in May 2016, there was some amendments regarding provision of car parks, but it only involved the sale of public housing units. Apparently, I think your planning standards are outdated. You need to review it. The major problem here is that you are using the provision of car parks to limit the usage of the roads. If you want to encourage more people to take public transport instead of buying their own vehicles, you should tackle the problem at the point of registration. And this is an environmental issue. Since you allow the cars to be traveling on roads and you don't build car parks, and you say you will allocate car parks according to the PSG, and you say you cannot provide for extra car parks, otherwise it will affect the quota for other developments. But the reality is that you have not cut down on the number of cars registered in Hong Kong. You keep allowing more cars to be registered, and there is already a shortfall of car parks. When you build more units and people have to drive, if we don't limit on the number of cars to be registered and there are not enough car parks, people just simply have to park on the roadside. So for the HKPSG, I wonder whether you could make a relaxation. And secondly, on the registration of vehicles, you need to do something about that. As for the planning, I think you should allow for car parks on the road service. You are building 600 odd units here. All of them will be owning cars, and providing such a small number would be unrealistic. But actually, other members have already raised the same point at various panels meetings. But the PWSC would not be shouldn't dwell on such broad policy issues. For every one of these items, they would take 7 or 8 years. So we still have time. And meanwhile, if we could review the policy, so that in future, when we discuss these public work PWSC projects, it would help. Thank you. Yeah, that's very clear. But in respect of this item, several members already made a similar point. I hope the Secretary will go back and see whether there's further room for improvement. Thank you. I will relay Mr. Ho's point to the departments concerned. Members, we still have Mr. Chen Chung-tai for the first round, followed by Wu Chi-wai and KK Kwok. So, if I may extend the meeting until 10:45, hopefully we'll be able to finish our deliberation of this item so that we don't need to come back for this item again. I believe all members are in support of this item. All right, agree? We're going to extend the meeting to 12:45. Mr. Chen Chung-tai, 4 minutes. Other than the transport considerations which all members are concerned about, looking at the plan for the quarters, I have one question. There are 8 units on each floor. Each unit is about 500 square feet in size. So does that mean that so no matter what the family size is, all the officers will be allocated the such 500 square feet units. I think the size of all these blocks are the same, right? Thank you, Mr. Chang. We will allocate the units according to the ranks of the officers. These quarters are for staff on the H grade, the rank and file grade. We have a scoring system. Of course, the officers must be married. We consider the years of service and the salary level and the size of the families, and we will allocate the units on that basis. Chairman, I asked this question because regarding the number of family members. I think we have had previous discussion on this. So you say the family size among the officers may be different, especially in many of these quarters for officers in different services. They are located in remote areas. So would you give more consideration to the family size? And if the quarters are more remote from the urban area, could you allow for more flexibility? I understand it's difficult, but there have been such demand from the disciplinary officers of the disciplinary services. Mr. Cheng is asking why it can't be like tenants of the PRH where the units could be built to accommodate 3, 4, or 5 member households. Thank you. The present standard was set after consultation with the staff side, and this is acceptable to the staff side. Regarding the rationale for this method, I'll ask Mr. Young to supplement. Regarding the scoring system, the director already said that this is based on the salary level of the staff and the years of service as well as the family status. And regarding, they have different scores depending on the number of children they have. They have more children, they will get a higher score and they get a better chance of being allocated a unit. I understand that, Chairman. According to the present criteria for officers with smaller households, is it possible for you to remove 1 or 2 of the rooms? Right now the rooms are so small, each about 80 square feet in size. I think your point is very clear. Perhaps the director can answer. When our officers move into the quarters, there are very stringent requirements because they cannot remove the walls. And when they move into the quarters, they will move in as the quarter, accept the quarter at its given state, and when they leave, they have to reinstate the quarters, to its original state. KK Kwok. Simple question. I understand that there were 600 odd units. There is only one multi-function room, about 300 square feet in size. There's an outdoor, playground for children. There will be 600 families living here, and the Pak Ching Kwok is like an island. So what facilities are there other than the multi-function room? Have you ever considered providing other recreational facilities for the children and the families there? Would you, for example, improve on the standard? In some private housing developments, even HOS and public housing estates, there are more facilities for the tenants. Here you have quarters accommodating 600 families, and there are so little facilities. And secondly, the duration is up to 2025. So in other words, after funding is approved, we have to wait for 7 years before completion. I wonder whether it's possible for you to expedite this project. You're talking about, a waiting period of, 6 years plus 5 years is 13 years. The average cost of $20,000 per square foot. Is that on par with the average, market level or what? Mrs. Lam.
三條問題啦。第一
There are 3 questions. First, the facilities, amenity and communal facilities. If I may refer members to enclosure 2, apart from an indoor multi-function room, most of the green parts on the plan is public open space for the residents. And there's a children playground, but that's not all. There's also landscaped area. The project will last for the 3 odd years, 3 years, and do we have any sports ground for the officers there? We will discuss with the staff side for the details. Well, you've only got 12 million for the furniture and fixtures. That's for the landscape area. What about a court or sports ground? Well, we may allow some facilities for ball games for children. All those can be considered. What about the other 2 questions? Yes, please do it briefly. And also the construction cost. The construction cost is comparable with other staff quarters. On the question of construction time, if we can secure the funding approval in the first quarter, it can be completed in second quarter of 2021. And the expenditure will be incurred up to 2025. After the project is completed, we have to make final payments according to the contract. It's the second quarter of 2021, the completion date. That's the quickest you can do. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, third round, 2 minutes. The Democratic Party supports this item. We hope this can be approved soon. But we have repeatedly raised our concerns about parking for vehicles and motorcycles. If this is not, if you cannot do more under the Hong Kong PSG, I hope the Security Bureau would look into the genuine needs of the officers living there. we have faced many problems in the community, which can easily turn into conflicts. These officers may have a higher demand for the use of their own cars because of the work locations that they have to go to. So I hope you can give us a written reply with regard to parking spaces for both private cars and motorcycles in staff quarters, and whether you have got any new strategy. I don't think the government should create a situation whereby the staff would have to park illegally on the road. Thank you, Mr. Wu. I thank Mr. Wu for his support of this item. Yes, I have sympathy for that situation, because these officers have to work shifts, and the needs may be different from ordinary citizens. We'll try to get more for our colleagues, and we'll reflect to the relevant departments the relevant problems we are facing. Under the Hong Kong PSG, there are many discounting factors which would prevent you from getting the maximum number of parking spaces. Can we do something about these discounting factors? I hope the Security Bureau will look into this. Otherwise, the residents in the neighborhood and these officers may have some conflicts between them. All right. I hope the matter can be followed up on other occasions. And before the item is put to the FC, please give us some good news, Under Secretary. Dr. Helena Wong. The Democratic Party supports this project to provide discipline services quarters to FSD officers. This is a married quarters. Are those with different marital status given quarters? For example, single, divorce, separated, widowers or widows. And if quarters have been offered and their marital status is changed subsequently, would they be asked to move out? Thank you.
政策呢就係喺資源許可嘅情況之下呢，係為已婚嘅紀律部。
Resources permit, we will provide quarters to married officers. Married officers are getting more quarters allocated than single officers, and we are arranging other quarters. Is it that single officers will never get the allocation of quarters? There's nothing for single officers unless they are post-tied quarters in remote working allocations. We already have a shortfall for married quarters, so we'd like to expedite the project. The waiting time for FSD is 6.3 years for married officers who are eligible for quotas. I hope the government would look into the issue of discrimination on the ground of marital status. You don't provide quarters to single officers based on resource considerations, but you have to look into this. The second question has not been answered. If at the time of allocation of quarters, the marital status of the officer is eligible, but what about there's a change in the marital status? Would the officers be asked to leave, to move out? I'll defer to FSD. If the spouse passes away or the officer has divorced, they can apply to stay. What's the chance of getting the approval? Most of them will be successful. Mr. Jeremy Tam, for the first round, as I've said, I believe we would like to deal with this item today. So even if we run a little bit beyond 10:45, we would deal with it. Mr. Jeremy Tam, I'll be quick. I support this project. The biggest concern is the car park. As we said on other panels, there's a general shortage of parking spaces in Hong Kong. There's some change in the past. There were some changes in the Hong Kong PSG, making the problem worse. We have been talking about this problem in so many panel meetings. The government should review the HK PSG. So before you proceed to the FC, please talk to the Transport Department and the parties responsible for the HK PSG to see if something can be revised. And I hope you would reserve the space. You should reserve the flexibility, some space to accommodate changes in design. If, for example, in the future, the relevant Hong Kong PSG is relaxed, you can add more, or you can pay a premium. You can reserve the flexibility of getting more parking spaces by paying a premium. This is being done for public housing estates. I hope you can consider doing this before you go to the FC. Under Secretary, thank you, Mr. Tam, for your suggestions. We'll look into those after the meeting. All right. Many members have expressed similar comments. If there's no further question, I'll now put the item to the vote. Would those in favor? Do we have a quorum? Yes. We need 6. Would those in favor? Or all of us? Unanimously passed. So the item is a pass, and it can go to the FC. Mr. Tam Ho wants this to be voted on at the FC separately. The next meeting is to be held on the 6th of February of Tuesday at 8:30. It's an additional meeting. All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.